Hey everyone, so today we are going to dive into the automations that you need for ConvertKit if you're running an online course. And we're going to go over 3 super important automations that cover your leads coming in before you actually launch the course, and then once you launch it, the automations you should have. So to start, we're going to go through the 3 automations, go through what they are, and then we're going to dive in and just start making them. So the first one that we're going to check out is the automation for leads. So it's the lead automation with a nurture sequence. So who goes into this automation? Well, it's an automation for non-members to go through whether they're coming in through a form, a lead magnet, an interest list, whether you're importing them, maybe they were at sort of a live event and they've signed up and now you have to import those names in, or they can also be members that maybe filled out a survey from your general list that are definitely excited and interested in the course that you're running. So again, these are non-members, but they're people who are interested in your course. So what's this automation that we're going to create? What's it going to do for these non-members? Well, it's going to act as a funnel to market your course to and make sure that they're qualified, interested leads. So basically what that means is we want to be able to separate these leads from your general list for a few different reasons, for analytic purposes. And then we also want to separate it from your list for what I like to call noise reduction purposes. So if somebody signed up for your list, but they don't necessarily want to be marketed to for a new online course, we want to make sure that we just market to the people that want to hear about it and that have expressed interest. So we want to reduce the noise for your entire list and really keep people on track with the information that they've signed up for as well. So as we enter this automation, some key notes are that these contacts are going to enter through a couple different ways. So it'll be through form submission, which we'll check out inside ConvertKit, and then also through tagging as well too. When we go into actually set them up, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about why I also do an entry method or a trigger through tagging, no matter what other trigger it is. So even if they purchase, because we can automatically trigger an automation after a purchase, or say they fill out a form, I always want to keep tagging as an additional entry to that automation in case anyone else who hasn't gone through those avenues wants to be added in a pinch. So I mentioned that here. Tagging is always added to trigger automation to easily bring in outside sources that didn't necessarily come from the form or direct signup. I'll also note that this automation is going to contain evergreen relative drip sequence or date-specific sequences. This will all become clear when we go in to set this up as well. So that's the first one for leads. The next automation we're going to create is for members. So the leads are the people who have not purchased yet, but the members are people who have purchased your course. So we really want to focus this automation on paid members. Now, what's this automation going to accomplish? Well, we want to be able to deliver content to paid members. So you can see why this will be different than the previous one, because we don't want to deliver content and deliver notifications or announcements to people who haven't paid for the course. So this delivers emails to members notifying them of new releases, key updates, information, and anything to do with the members portal. Keep in mind that these emails are notifications, but they don't contain the core content. They can have snippets of it, but we want to make sure that we understand that the core content is still kept in the course platform, but we do want to send them emails for any announcements as well as to keep all the members on track and accountable to this course that they've signed up for. So some key notes about this automation are that contacts will enter this automation through purchasing. Again, we're also going to have them enter through tagging as well too, because sometimes if they don't purchase, maybe you gave away a program for free, you discounted it for someone specific. We always want to make sure there's more than one avenue to enter an automation just for all of these fringe case scenarios that inevitably come up during a launch. So we want to anticipate and prepare for those ahead of time. Now, this is only for paid members because it contains information only available behind the paywall. So they're going to get put on this automation after they've paid, because they're going to get key information that is part of what they paid for. So this automation can either be made evergreen, which is to say it's always running and never really changes, or it can be date specific where we change the actual days of delivery inside of the automation. And when I say delivery, I mean email delivery. We're going to be dealing mostly with emails today, keep it really straightforward and just cover the basics. So this content is relatively stable and goes unchanged over time. Of course, if you update your course, you're going to want to update these emails as well. But we want to make sure that this is one of our core automations that we can always rely on and we're not constantly changing. Now, the last automation is bonus content or live call delivery. This is another automation that's specifically geared towards members of your online program. Only paid members will get access, but the difference between this and the previous one is that we want this one to be adjustable. So this one's going to deliver core content notifications, core announcements, and core course-related emails that no matter what changes with the course, as long as the content remains the same, no matter if the dates change, this will always stay constant. Now, the difference between that and, say, bonus or live content delivery is that any live content will most likely be updated fairly frequently. So if you're running a cohort that, say, starts in September, goes to December, you'll have dates specific to that cohort. If you're doing live calls, you have specific live call days and announcements for those live calls that you have to show up for. And then after that's completed, before you launch the next course, those will all change again because the dates will change. The dates of the live calls will change because the people will change. And also, you've already created that call, so you'll have to create a new one for the next round anyways. So this is a constantly changing automation, whereas this first one really focuses on delivering the core content and staying stable throughout the whole launch period and future launch periods. So those are the three types that we're going to get into. And also, I do want to make sure that I mention, since every single online program is going to be a little bit different, we're going to be making some general assumptions along the way in real time as we put these together. So let's hop over to ConvertKit and start building. So we're inside ConvertKit right now, and the first one that we want to create is the lead automation. So we want to go over to Automate here, click on Visual Automations, and once in here, we want to create a new one. So we'll do a new automation, and we're going to create an empty one from scratch. If you go through the ConvertKit documentation, you can go through all of these pre-made ones, which are great, but I really want you to understand how they're made from scratch. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's do start from scratch. It's automatically going to bring you to this page. This is the trigger. So this is how do we start an automation? How do people enter this automation? Well, one of the first things that I'm going to do is rename it because Visual Automation 1 is not very descriptive. And in a previous YouTube video, which I'll link below, I went through how to put together proper naming convention. So in that last video and in all my other videos, I have this sort of sample course that I use for all my material. It's called Online Course Academy, and the acronym is OCA. So I use that for a lot of my examples. So for this one, we're going to go OCA, lead, because we want to stick with naming conventions here. OCA, we know which course it's for. We know it's for the leads. Now we could stop here. We could just say OCA leads, and that's it. I'm going to do OCA leads 2023 onboarding. So at least we know OCA, this is the program. Here, the program it's related to. They're the leads. This is the date, and we know it's onboarding, so it's going to be one of their first interactions with our content. So again, coming back here, what we want to do is find a form of entry. So for us, because this is our first automation and we're targeting leads, we're going to check for anyone who fills out a form. So the form can be anywhere. The form can be embedded on the website. It can be on its own web page. It can be attached to a lead magnet. But we want to trigger people to enter this automation when they fill out a specific form. So join form. Right now, I'm going to say form. I'm going to create a new form, create an inline form here. So it will, again, it'll automatically label it Claire Forms, go OCA. OCA leads, opt-in. Great. So we've created the form as soon as we click save in the top right corner. So as soon as we click save here, it's going to create the form as an entry to this automation. So as I mentioned, go back here. As I mentioned a couple times, not only are we going to create one mode of entry to this automation, but we're also going to create a tag. So a tag is always added to the trigger of our automation to easily bring people inside that don't directly come through a form. So we can add a secondary entry into this automation by clicking the little plus mark beside it. So we're going to do, as soon as a tag is added, and we can add a tag here. And again, we want to stick with naming conventions, OCA lead 2023. Great. So now we have 2 points of entry to this automation. As soon as someone enters their name and email address into a form that lives somewhere on the website, they'll be entered into it. And as also the people who are tagged as OCA lead will also be entered into it. The reason I added 2, again, is because if people don't come from the opt-in form, say they come from a live event, or they express interest in your general email list by clicking a link, they can be added to this tag in a variety of ways, and we'll make sure that we get them onto this automation. So from here, we want to click the middle plus sign, which means both of these modes of entry will funnel into the next item. So for this next item, basically what I want people to do is I want them to enter the onboarding sequence. Now, our onboarding sequences, for the sake of this example, are going to start on a specific day. You can have an onboarding sequence that starts right away as soon as they opt in, sends them a few emails, and is able to warm them up. Now, I'm going to do a combination of these two things. We're going to have the actual onboarding start on a specific day, but as soon as they sign up, we don't want to leave them hanging, so we will send them an immediate email. So as soon as you click on this plus button, you'll be presented with a few actions. So what we want to do is add them to an email sequence. And this email sequence, I don't have any created, so we're going to say OCA lead welcome. So OCA lead welcome, this is the first email that they're going to get. Add that action. Great. So they come into this automation through the form or through being tagged, they get a welcome email right away. They get something right away so we can make contact, we can make them feel welcome, tell them a little bit about what to expect in the upcoming days or weeks or even months. And then we want to bring them into a dedicated promotional sequence. Now, for the sake of this fake course, we're going to start our promotional period on a certain day. And we're going to do that so I can show you how to set things on certain days, basically. So as soon as people come in, they get an email right away. But then we also want them to delay for a little while before they get the next mode of communication. Now, that delay, if I click here, there's actions, and you can see the word delay. Now, if I click on delay, it allows two things. It allows us to delay a certain number of days, so we can delay it for 30 days before they get their next email, or delay until a custom date. Now, for this one, this custom date has to be based on a custom field that contact has. But people coming in don't have any custom fields yet. The only information we have for them is their name and email address. There are no other fields that we have for these folks. There's a few different ways to do that. We can either assign them a custom date and then delay it until that custom day. Now, there's definitely circumstances where you want to create a custom field for a contact, add a date to that custom field, and then have events trigger according to that date, which is absolutely an option. But a lot of the times I choose to go a little bit more of a straightforward route, and I'm going to show you that as well. So there's two different ways you can do that. The one that I'm doing, you don't have to do. It's my preferred method, but there's definitely use cases for both of these scenarios. So as we saw in action, there was a delay. We're actually not going to go into action. We're going to go into event. And then we're going to go to date occurs. So what this is going to do is it's going to hold in this automation until the date occurs and then carry them through. So I'm going to go March 1st, 2023. We could pick a time as well. 8 a.m. And I'm going to add that event. So what people are going to do, they're going to come into the sequence, going to welcome one right away, and then they're going to get held until March 1st because that's when our promotional period starts. Then we're going to hit plus again, and we're going to send them an email after March 1st. Now we have OCA lead welcome. Our next email is going to be OCA lead nurture sequence. Great. Or we can say promo. Whichever you choose, just make sure you're consistent across the board. And then we're going to add that action. Great. So people are entering in through whichever one of these two avenues. They get an email right away, and then they wait. So whenever they enter, whether they enter in November of the previous year or February of the following year of 2023, they will get the welcome email right away. But whenever they enter, they are going to be held until March 1st at 8 a.m. before they get put on this promotional sequence. So this promotional sequence is going to be a combination of emails that, and it's, let's say for this sake, it's one email that's emailed out every week. So if we click on that, it brings us into the email template. It's the standard email template. You'll see you'll be able to adjust copy, write everything in there. Now by default, it says send this email after a day, but I want to go down to 0, so it sends it immediately because I've already set my dates here. So as you can see, as we work through things, there's a bunch of different ways to delay your emails. There's the one we saw here, which was delay. You can delay it a certain amount of days and then trigger it. You can put in a specific date event that it has to hit before it moves forward to deliver it. Or inside the email sequence itself, you can trigger how many days are waited before that email goes out. All of these work, and all of these are sort of variances depending on your situation. What I like to do is any objective dates, I will put them in the automation and then have the email go out immediately after that date is hit. So this is set to go out immediately after the March 1st date hit. So over on the right-hand side, you'll see emails, and this is in draft. We have a published button here that we can set it to published. We also have a button here we can add more emails. So this is a single email that goes off right away, but we can add more emails to this sequence. So if we go in and add another email, you'll see that this first one goes off immediately. And then this other one says after 1 day. But we can go up to 4 days. So we can send another email after 4 days. And then we can send another email after 7 days, and so on and so on. This is what's called relative dates. So what relative dates are is that it will send an email out the amount of days relative to the previous email sent. So the first one, as you can see on the right-hand side, is immediately. The next one is 4 days, so 4 days after the immediately one. And the next one is 7 days. So that's 7 days after the 4-day one. So it's not 7 days from the immediately one when it kicks off. It's 7 days relative to the email that went out before that. So this is what we call relative dates, or relative date distribution, or like a relative drip. So these dates are relative to the email that went out before that. I will go back to the automation here as well too, because I wanted to point out that this date that we put in, this March 1st, is an absolute date. This date is not relative to anything before it, because as I mentioned, as soon as someone joins, they get the welcome email. Doesn't matter when they get the welcome email, because no matter what, the next set of emails goes out on March 1st. It's not relative to the welcome email. So this is what we call an absolute date. It's not relative to the date before, it's standalone and it's absolute. So if you see me referencing relative dates and absolute dates, that's the distinguishing factor that I want to make sure you understand. Relative means it's relying on the email before that to get its timing right, whereas absolute just means it stands alone. It's absolutely alone. Great. So let's go back and check where we're at. We've got our opt-in form as a way of entry. We've got our lead as a way of entry. We've set up a welcome email they get right away. They wait until March 1st. Then they get popped onto the promotional sequence. Once they get popped onto the promotional sequence, they get an email right away. They get an additional email 4 days after that, and they get an additional email 7 days after that as well. So if you think about it, because everyone is getting kicked off on this promotional sequence on March 1st, that means even though these are relative dates, everyone's going to be on the same pace with all of these as well. You can go through and add more event dates and more emails underneath those event dates, or you can add them inside this sequence itself. So that's totally personal preference and up to you. But what I like to do a lot of the times is if everyone needs to get onto the same page, I'll create an absolute date that everyone needs to hit. And then we'll go into a relative sequence from there as well too. Also, one of the most important things, please make sure your emails are published after you've created them, because if they're not published, it will bypass that email and it won't get sent. So keep that in mind as well too. We are almost finished our first automation. So let's do the final step, which is adding a delay to the bottom. So the reason why I like to add a delay to the bottom of every one of my sequences, no matter what, and I like to do it for about let's say 100 days. Now, this is random and it's totally up to you how you want to proceed through this. But basically what that means is that once people go through to the end of the sequence, if I did not have a delay in here, they would end the automation and leave right away. But what if I wanted to add more emails? Or what if I wanted to give them an extra incentive? Or what if I wanted to expand the promotional period because now I have a new partner or somebody that wants to come on and add more bonuses and things like that? Well, that means we would have to create a whole new automation. So instead of doing that, I like to add a delay of about 100 days, 100 to 200 days afterwards. That way, if anything comes up towards the end, you can always slot it in without having to create an automation. So you would slot it in after, because they'll be held on the 100 days here. You would slot it in after whatever it is, and then delete this this step here. That's sort of a little hack that I like to do just as best practice myself. Once you've completed this automation, click it to live. It's going to ask you, make sure you want to turn it on. And it's live and good to go. Now, in this case, anytime someone comes in through the opt-in form or through the lead, they get the welcome email, they wait, then they get the promotional emails, one right away, one 4 days later, and one 7 days after that. And then they get held for 100 days just in case there's anything else we want to add onto this automation so they don't get chucked out of it. Great, so that is our first automation. Let's dive into the next one. Now that we have the basics of automations in general, I think we can get through these other ones a little bit faster. So, new automation. Now this next one is for members. So, again, with our naming conventions, we want to make sure it's OCA, members, because it's not leads, members 2023. Great. Start building. They're not going to come in through a form. They're going to come in through let's put them in through a purchase. So if they've made a purchase through ConvertKit, we're automatically going to add them. Let's say for this sake, any product. We'll add event. And like everything else as well too, we want to add a tag. So if they have the tag, OCA member 2023, we'll go ahead and add that as well too. Perfect. So if they purchase the product, any product now, we'll assume that we only have the one, and OCA member 2023. Next step, we want to create, go back over here because we're on this one. It's for paid members, and we basically want to create a sequence of emails that's going to deliver content to them, and this content stays relatively the same. So this is reminder content of information that is in the members portal already. It keeps members on track and accountable, gives them announcements, gives them notifications, and reminders for any upcoming content as well. This one should be pretty straightforward because we want to make sure that everyone is behind the paywall. We're going to do pretty much exactly the same thing because once they join, we want to give them a welcome email. So OCA, members, welcome email. Great. So as soon as they join, they get a welcome email. Awesome. Then, because our launch period ideally will probably be about a week or two, so anytime they sign up, we want them to get the email right away. We want to set expectations inside that email. Say, welcome, thank you so much for purchasing the course. Here's what to expect over the upcoming days as we prepare to get ready for the course. Then we want to set an absolute date. So the date occurs. And let's say our course launches in April. Our promotion started in March. Say our course starts maybe May 1st. And then we want to select the time here. So May 1st, 9 a.m. Great. They're going to get the welcome email right away. They're going to be held until May 1st, 9 a.m. Then we're going to go ahead and create another email sequence. It's going to be content delivery. And we'll add that one. Always before we exit our automation, we want to click here and do our little delay of 100 days. Just in case there's anything else we want to add onto it before they get kicked out of that automation. Great. So now we have the basic structure. We set it up a little bit faster, so this should be more straightforward. We have the purchase of the product or them being tagged as a member. They get the email right away. They're held until May 1st, which is when the course starts. Then they start their content delivery. This one, we can also do the same thing. You'll see that now this says it's going out a day after. We want to put that to 0 so they get the email immediately. And we can also do the same sort of drip on the right-hand side here as well. So say it's a 6-week course and you want to deliver content once per week. So they're going to get the content immediately, which is a Monday, May 1st. Then we want to put the content out. We can do 7 days. Oh, we do hours. Okay, let's do 7 days. Then we can do 7 days. And then this one, 7 days as well. And 7 days as well, and so on. So this is immediately, they'll get maybe a notification that gives them some information about Module 1, if it gets released on May 1st. 7 days later, they'll get an email about Module 2. 7 days after that, so it's not 7 days after the first one, it's 7 days. These are relative emails, so it's 7 days in relation to the previous email that was sent out. And then 7 days, we've got Module 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they'll get 2 more there. And 7. So then we have 6 emails, maybe 1 welcome email for each module that gets dripped out. So this is our sequence. Let's review it again. As soon as they purchase the product or they get tagged, they get a welcome email right away. They get held until the very specific date that the course starts on. And then we start course delivery emails. Something to keep in mind as well here too, if you're in a sequence and you're making a bunch of emails or even one email where the date is relative, you also have to think about whether that person wants to be put through that sequence more than once. So there are some settings to consider here as well too. So I clicked on settings on the upper right-hand corner. We want to make sure we have the settings set of who the email is being sent from, like what email address it's being sent from. You can do this in their settings of ConvertKit and should be done relatively soon after you've signed up. And then over here on our right-hand side, we have the sequence behavior. I always click yes, they have the ability to restart the sequence multiple times. So if they finish it and we can put them back on it if they want new reminders or if they join again for any reason. Now this is up to you, but I want to make sure that you have these settings available because it's important down the line when you start to take people off or re-add them to sequences. And yes, I always click this one too. Subscribers added via the visual automations, which is how we're adding them, should stay in the sequence when they're added to it. So let's update that. Great. So because that's updated for the entire sequence, that's the case for all of these. We don't have to go through each individual email and update the settings. We just have to update it once per sequence as well. Do you want the same thing for the welcome one? Totally up to you. I don't think people need the welcome email more than once, but it's possible to change those settings in there as well too. So keep in mind, every time you're creating a sequence of emails, it may just have a one-off one, or it may have a relative drip of emails inside of it, but you should always check out the settings here to make sure that everything is correct, especially if people should be put on those again as well. Great, so that's 2 automations down, 1 to go. So let's go back here. Oops. See how it paused? That means I didn't turn it on. Turn it on. Great. We can go back here. Now we're going to start new automation. So it says Visual Automation 3. Now, as we had mentioned before, this one, our last one here, is going to be for bonus content or live call delivery. I do live call delivery as an example. Now, the idea for this one, actually I should say the idea for the previous one, is that it stays stable. You don't really have to change it. It's the same drip. It's the same content. But the live call one, the reason I put it on a different automation altogether is because it needs to be edited relatively often, definitely after or before each cohort, and sometimes in the middle of it as well too. So I like to keep them separate because this one is edited a lot more. And once the one that's stable and is delivering content is done, we want to be able to put it aside and not have to worry about it. And I like to keep this one separate so that we're always going in and updating just the one without disturbing the other automation that's pretty much ready to go. You can combine this call delivery and the core content drip into one automation. Over time, I found that keeping them separate has made things a lot easier when you're making modifications down the line. So we're going to keep these separate. We want to try to keep things organized from the very beginnings because as we grow, that's when things get so much more complex. And I've seen it happen. So all of these suggestions is definitely coming from me having done it the wrong way and figuring out the better way. So let's keep this one separate. So this one's going to be OCA. It's going to be a members one as well. Members 2023. Oops. Live calls. So how are these people joining? This one's interesting because we're going to do a tag. And it's going to be tags that already exist. So we have OCA members 2023 because this is going to everyone that is a member. So this is going to have the same points of entry as the other one. It doesn't matter which order you enter them in, but we do want to make sure that they come in through the tag and they also come in through the purchase that we had previously as well. And previously we just used any product as the purchase, but as if you have your individual product, it'll come up in that dropdown. So the points of entry, as I mentioned, are exactly the same as the previous members one because everyone who joins gets put on the members one and gets put on the live calls as well. So because the points of entry are the same, we have to keep in mind what they're also getting from their previous automation. They're already getting a welcome email from their previous automations. They don't need that here. This one is specifically geared towards the delivery of our live calls to make sure that they get the information that they need for the Zoom call, to be able to log in, for the recording, and all of that stuff as well too. So we're going to dive right into emails here. They've already got a welcome one. We're going to get ready for the live calls they're going to be able to get in the course. So let's start right away with email sequence. We're going to say OCA member 2023 live calls. So we created the email right away. So if you can see, there's something I did wrong here. As soon as they enter the sequence, they get the email for the live calls. But what we want to do is we want to wait. Like I said, they already get a welcome email as soon as they join. So we want to make sure that they only get the live call information. They don't get it too far ahead of time. They get it as soon as they need it, maybe the day before the live calls, because they're going to know that there's live calls coming up from the welcome email. But we don't need to tell them that information too soon because it will be forgotten. And then your customer service will be inundated with when is the live calls. So we want to make sure we give them reminders relatively close to when the live calls are going to happen. So for that, we want to make sure that we put in an absolute date. So we want to wait until this date occurs. Now the course starts on May 1st. So maybe the first call isn't until the 8th. And we have, so we wait till the 8th at 8 a.m. Then they get their live calls. Now, once they enter the sequence, I want to make sure that goes out immediately. Now, once they enter the sequence, they do call one, reminder, and then I can add an email, publish that, and then add an email, call one, replay, and maybe that goes out after one day. So a good example for these is that we have call one reminder going out first, and then a day later, call one replay going out after that, basically saying to people, if you miss call, the replay is up, and a lot of times it'll be up the next day, but this totally depends on your operations within your company. If you're able to get it up the next day, great. A lot of the people, as soon as a call is done, they'll publish it right away or relatively soon after just to get it off their plate. But we want to make sure that these days are according to what our business operations are. So say if the replay goes up 3 days after, we can put that here. But overall, if you can get up the replay one day after, that would be great. So now we have some options, and I'll tell you why I'll do this a certain way. For these call reminders, say we have one on Monday, because we're going out Monday, May 8th, and then we have the next call on the Wednesday. You can say an email So the one reminder maybe is going out Monday morning, the replay a day later on Tuesday morning. Then if we have a call on Wednesday, we can send this one out a day later with the announcement for the Wednesday call. But then if there's another, and then the reminder can go out a day later, and then 3 days later, the next call. This can get, with a lot of emails, especially because there's replay emails and things like that, this can get quite confusing. So what I like to do for any kind of bonus content or bonus calls or things that you know people may go in and need to shift around and make edits to relatively frequently, we want to make this a bit more clear. Because once we get past 5 or 6 emails with relative dates, then things start to get really messy where it is when you want to think about where it is compared to day one. And if everything in your calendar is set on specific days and you look in here and just see a bunch of relative days, it's really easy to make mistakes when you're editing. So we want to be able to use the system in the best way to make it foolproof. So we're not going to create all of our repeat call, reminder, and replay emails in the same sequence. I'm going to delete this last one and just keep the reminder and the replay. So everything related to call one is in one sequence. Great. So I'm actually going to rename this sequence as well here. Live calls. Call one. Great. So if we click back to the automation, we've got kicking off on May 8th. Members, live calls, call one. And when we look in here, it has the call reminder. Oh, this one, sometimes it doesn't delete. It has the call reminder and then the call replay, which it didn't save the title for. It does that. So the next one we want to do is our next call. We want to set the event and date occurs. So May 8th, maybe our next call is May 12th at 8 a.m. Or we want the email to be sent at 8 a.m. And then we go here, email sequence. We call this call 2. And then we're going to do the same thing. So we go in here, we make a call to reminder immediately. We're going to add email 1 day later, call to replay. Great. So these two are both in one sequence. And again, go into your settings, see if you want people to be re-put on that sequence or not, and set those accordingly as well. And then we come back here and we've got our kickoff date, call number 1, reminder replay. We wait for another date to be hit, call number 2, reminder replay as well too. Now, the good thing about separating them in this way, there's a few different things. The first thing is that if any of the dates of the calls change, so a lot of times these launches are planned out months ahead of time, and then if availability or something like that changes for the convener who's hosting the call, and sometimes these dates can change. So we want to make sure that these are easily accessible to be changed, which is why we don't want to stack all of these inside relative dates. I like to make each call announcement its own absolute date, and then inside of it, do the reminder and the replay for that specific call. So if someone comes and says, oh, they're feeling really sick on May 12th, let's delay the call until May 15th, you can just come in here, provided it needs to be done before the date has been hit, change it to May 15th, and then update the event, change it to the 15th, to click up here, and then update the event. Great, now it's changed to 15th, and these emails will kick off accordingly. So before they were held until the 12th, then they were sent the emails. Now they're held until the 15th, and they're sent these emails. That being said, you still have to go into the emails and change any copy that relates to the call announcement if there's been changes to it as well. But the nice thing is, as soon as you click into it, you can see all of the dates that the emails for the calls are going out on. And it's a lot easier organized that way. So finally, I'm going to go in, hit a delay here, 100 days. Sometimes people want to add on more calls. Sometimes things happen with bonuses. We want to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room, again, so they don't get kicked off the automation and we don't have to create a new one just to retarget these people. So you would continue this pattern down for all of the calls. They're having 2 calls a week, then you would have 12 dates in here followed by 12 email sequences. So that's how people are pushed through this automation. I've just made 2 right now, but you would have all of the calls that were involved. And then inside those emails, you would have all of the information like, here's the link to the Zoom. This is the time of the call. Call's going to open up at this time. Here's how we're going to handle questions. Here's a form if you want to submit questions beforehand and so on. All of that information can be inside the email, but we want to make sure that these emails are timed correctly. And if there's any changes to the call schedule, those are easily editable as well. And this is the best way that I have found how to do these in ConvertKit. So we're going to set this live, turn it on. And that covers our 3 main automations that we want to create when running an online course. So it's a really quick overview again. The first one is for onboarding people. If you're collecting folks from lead lists, if you're collecting people through tags or outside events, anything like that, they can enter this, get a welcome email right away, and then be kicked off into a promotional sequence for the course that they've signed up to have interest in. Again, we always put this little 100-day delay on. You can put more than that. It's a totally arbitrary number, but it's to keep people on the automation a little bit longer in case things change or need to be added. Next one, as we mentioned, was for members. Again, this is to deliver the core content. People are brought onto here once they've paid or once they've maybe been gifted the program through this and tagged accordingly. They're added as members right away, and then they get added to the content delivery as soon as the kickoff date has passed as well too. This error loading stats happens sometimes as well. It's a bit of a ConvertKit issue, so just keep that in mind. Nothing's wrong with anything that you've done. The final one is also for members too, but if you're having live calls, this is the one that you will be in editing and changing dates for as things change and evolve with your course. The previous one we mentioned is really just for stable content and can be used anytime throughout the year and is pretty easy to set it and forget it, whereas something that has a live component, I like to keep it separately because a lot of the times it will need a lot of editing and a lot of variation. Again, you can combine these last 2 into one automation because they have the same triggers that kick them off. Over time, I've learned to keep them separately because so much can change with live calls, especially when they're planned out so far ahead of time. So I like to keep the stable content in one automation and something that'll be frequently edited in another. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Please let me know if any questions come up, and I'll see you next time.